Hello, huge movie fanatic Nate stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review the sequel to The Exorcist by the name of The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. This movie I wouldn't see until probably in my mid or late 20s. I didn't see the first movie until I was 23 when that was back when the version you never seen actually hit theaters. So as I said in my review of The Exorcist that is on this channel, I first saw The Exorcist in the theater, which was really cool, in 2000 I think, for the version you haven't seen. And I wouldn't see The Exorcist 2 until, as I said, mid to late 20s or something. I probably just blind bought the DVD. I want to say I found it at Circuit City or something like that. And having just revisited it, recently, because I'm like, I think the second most viewed video on this channel is the Exorcist review, and I'm like, well, why don't I just do, rewatch and review Exorcist 2 and 3? So that's what I'm doing. So I'm here to review Exorcist 2, and having reviewed it, I'm just like, incidentally, I did find this at half price on, Scream Factory Blu-ray for like $18 or $19, and I was like, should I get it? And I'm like, well, no, I don't really like it. I'm glad I didn't, because I rewatched the DVD recently, and oh my gosh, I really, really don't like this movie at all. I really feel like it's just, I don't think it has anything to do with, like, I don't think it's really based on a William Peter Blatty story, or I think it's just its own thing, which is kind of just, in my opinion, kind of just a money grab. And I just, watching it recently, I was just like, I didn't feel like the movie should have necessarily started with that possessed girl scene. And I don't know, the guy who plays the main priest in this movie, I don't really like at all. He doesn't really have any humanity to him. He's just like this serious robot guy. It's just, I don't really like the priest guy, so don't really like much about this movie. One thing I like probably the most about it is, the only saving grace, or for me, the only really good thing about this movie is it obviously has a return of Linda Blair. I really feel like her character, revisiting, that's one of the weaknesses I think about this movie, revisiting her character again after the events of the first movie, I think is absolutely pointless. For all intents and purposes, she's cured and clear of the bad, the bad evil or whatever at the end of the first movie. There's really no need to go and revisit the character of Reagan again. But, Linda Blair is such a, particularly at this age, she's not really very hard to look at. And she's kind of a bright and bubbly on-screen personality. So for me, she's the best thing about this movie, even though I don't feel like her character does anything that's really warrants her even being there at all. I will say what they did come up with for her return was kind of cool, and to be honest, even though I just rewatched this recently, I'm not exactly sure what the hell this movie is even about. It seems to me, I don't know, I guess she goes to this Louise Fletcher character, I think as a psychiatrist at this one spot for troubled kids or whatever. So I think the main reason she's there is just, from psychiatrist to get help, just talking to her about what she, dealt with. And there's this, talk between Louise Fletcher doctor character and this priest or whatever that, there's this kind of conflicting info. Is like, does she remember anything from what happened? Does she not? And I think as the movie wears on, we kind of realize that if she doesn't, remember consciously, that certainly some of the events, or potentially all the events that she witnessed, are suppressed, and are retained in some form or another inside her. If you're a big Exorcist 2 fan and I get details wrong, forgive me. This movie, I find it to be, as I've said so often in other reviews that I've done in the past, I'm kind of a person who can get a story, or who can absorb a story more better if it's just, seeing things unfold visually and stuff, more than just basically people sitting around and talking the movie through dialogue and exposition and all this kind of stuff. What I can gather about this movie, it's ironic, it seems like everything in Reagan's life is fine until, I don't know what is making this priest want to seek her out. This movie is not really memorable for me, so if I, can't remember details and plot points, forgive me. It's just the way this movie works with me, or rather doesn't really work with me. It seems like this guy, I don't know what the hell this guy's on some quest. This guy's, this guy having, maybe just done an exorcism himself to this young girl or whatever at the beginning of the movie. He's maybe on some kind of a quest to, I don't understand, maybe he gets visions, I don't remember, of, the exorcism from the first movie. I don't know why he wants to seek out Regan or whatever, but it seems like everything in Regan's life is fine until this priest asshole comes into her life, and also that this one of the cooler things about this movie is they have this hypnotism machine with two lights on each side, and it's supposed to be one person set on one side, the other person on the other, and these flashing lights will kind of bring them in sync in the hypnotic world or whatever. It's almost like a pre-Matrix or Lawnmower Man kind of a thing in a way, where they'll get hypnotized together and these flashing lights will, blink at the same speed, and when that happens they're actually hypnotized in sync or whatever, and one person can actually, they're both hypnotized and one person can actually, experience the flashbacks that the other person is experiencing in their hypnotized state, which is a kind of a cool plot point about this movie. And there's this one really cool scene where, towards the beginning, where this Louise Fletcher is doing this with the Regan character, and you see a little kind of half exposure of like possessed Regan on the bed, and she's like grabbing at Louise Fletcher's heart, and it's kind of a cool little gimmick and this kind of stuff. And it's just one thing I will say about this movie is anytime you flash back to like possessed Regan from part one, it's really disappointing because like the voice is completely and totally different. I don't know if the person who did the voice died between the first one and this one, or why the hell the voice of possessed Regan is so different and lame in this movie. But that's one thing that really threw me off, because the voice in the first movie is just so classic and cool. All of a sudden it's just like, here, let's get the voice that's just the least interesting to do and have them do it. It's like, what the hell? So to me, it's like Regan, and from what I can gather from this movie, Regan was kind of more or less fine until this priest and this Louise Fletcher character started fiddling around with her, and that kind of raised hell, if you will, and maybe brought the... that's one thing I don't like about this movie, is this idea that there is still some residual evil inside Regan. Once again, if I'm getting details wrong, forgive me. I can't understand this movie for shit. So it's just like, oh gee, thanks Father, whatever the hell your name is, and Louise Fletcher character, like, for turning my more or less normal life that I'm trying to live back into hellish demon crap. And that's one thing. One of the things I dislike the most about this movie is like the African Pazuzu, and naming the evil with that stupid name Pazuzu, and this African, not that I have a problem with African one this or that or anything like that, but I don't like the whole like African aspect in the locusts and following the locusts, evil Pazuzu locusts around and showing the father whatever, and this whole climbing the mountains and just all of this kind of stuff. I mean, it is cool to have James Earl Jones in this, and it is kind of cool to have Max von Sydow back to reprise his makeup wearing role as the older father. There's so many father names in all three of these movies. I don't know who the hell father, is it Maris? I don't know Max von Sydow's character, if it's Father Maris, I don't frickin' know. But it's cool to see him back in, like, I don't know, extra scenes that we really didn't see in the first movie, or extra bits to have Max von Sydow back. And it's really kind of cool to see him. It's almost like they planned to make part two with the younger Max von Sydow, because I always wondered why they cast him in the first one wearing old man makeup. And it's kind of like, it almost seems like the Superman 1 and 2 kind of thing, where they almost knew they were going to do a sequel, and they're like, well, let's cast a young guy as this old guy, and then that way in the sequel we can have the young version of him, which is probably one of the more competent things about this movie, whether it was planned from the beginning or not. That was kind of cool. It's just like, why are we casting a young guy to do an old man part? Maybe it was just too intense of a role for the first movie to actually have a guy that his age, an older guy, do it. Maybe that's why. But it was kind of cool, regardless whether it was just a lucky break or whatever. It was kind of cool to see, the younger version of that character, which is actually Max von Sydow's real age at the time, doing his archaeological whatever he was doing or whatever. So there are a few really small cool things about this movie, but for me it's mostly Probably one of the only good things about this movie is the little detail that they unveil about, it's kind of was kind of it was briefly touched upon in the first movie, but it's more, more touched upon in this one, where it's like the evil in this movie. I don't know if it possesses. Well, we see it like possess two other people. This girl at the very beginning of the movie, and the James Earl Jones character, and it seems like there's a theme that runs through, this movie, where evil possesses people that are like healers. They're young people, because in the first movie it was like he's making it a travesty that they would have possessed this young, innocent girl or whatever, and they took it kind of further, where it's just like, well, they're not only possessing young innocent people, but young innocent like healer people, just to make even the worst statement possible. We're going to take this healer and possess them and put all kinds of dirty words in their mouths and do all kind of this and that, and try to take away from all of the the healing they've done over the years, or in the case of these young healers, all the healing they've done over the course of the weeks and stuff like that, and we'll just put it right back in their faces, and we'll undo all the healing that they've done through these healers' bodies, and it'll be such a horrible, frickin' statement. We'll just be so evil in doing so. That was kind of cool, and it even well, one could argue, I don't know, so at some point, like halfway through this movie or whatever, Linda Blair character talks to this young, quote-unquote, autistic girl who's like, introvert and, can't really, has a hard time speaking, and kind of gets her talking and stuff, and everyone is all amazed, and her mom's all amazed, and I gotta, have her dad here, before she stops talking. And so basically we kind of realize, that maybe Linda Blair is going to be kind of a healer as well, and that's why she was also possessed. It's kind of like, taking some liberties and in the sequel and whatever. I guess a sequel has a perfect right to do whatever it wants to do with moving forward or whatever, but that's some of the most competent writing of this movie that I could find. It's just like, oh, the healers are the targets. Just take the best people, the most helpful people, and possess them. It's just like, what an evil statement. Not sure I really have much more to even say about this movie. I think it was really kind of pathetic, having revisited it recently, that they have this epic showdown, at in the same room that the first movie took place. I think it was kind of a stretch, and just to try to recreate what was done in the first movie. I'm like, I never would have imagined that Exorcist 2 would have the need to go back to the same house and even the same bedroom and have the end take place there. It's just like, oh, give me a break. This movie's so forgettable that pretty much every time I watch it, it's like seeing it for the first time, because it's just like, oh my gosh. So like I say, I mean, I really just don't like the Africa/locust stuff. I don't like much of this movie. I don't like the guy, as I already said, who plays the father, who just seems to be this brooding kind of a troubled, tormented freaking guy, and it's just like, well, you could probably be a lot better off if you got out of your, your freaking religious stuff and just led like a normal life or something like that. I mean, that's, these movies, I've said so many times in reviews past of Amityville movies or any kind of these religious movies, like for me, it's like the scariest part of these movies is just seeing the scary ass religious aspects of the quote unquote good priests, and just that nasty bit where this one bigwig guy is talking to this guy towards the beginning of the movie and getting all, having all of his servants disrobe, take all these important clothing articles off him after he performed some kind of a big ballyhoo service or whatever the hell he did, and just treating this guy like he's just the most important thing, on earth. And it's just like, doing all this, taking all this stuff off for him, and it's just like, ugh. I mean, like I said in so many reviews of these religious kind of movies, the scariest thing for me is actually just seeing all these priests and all these religious people, basically gathering around and talking to each other, is probably more scary than seeing a possessed kid, turn her head around and spit up puke or whatever and stab herself in the you-know-what with the you-know-what and making it all you-know-what-y. Well, I can say bloody. But I guess that'll pretty much do it for my review of Exorcist 2. Not a big fan of this movie. It's only going to be 1 star out of 4 stars for Exorcist 2. I really feel like, although I like the director, it wasn't that the same guy who did Deliverance. I like the director. I just felt like this story was just padding. The whole thing, in my opinion, was padding just for an excuse to, bring back Linda Blair. And as much as it was cool to see her back, as I said at the beginning of this review, ultimately there's really no point in having the character back. I thought the ending, as I already said, with the showdown or whatever, I can't even remember what happened at the end with, in her bedroom from the first movie, and I don't even remember what happened. I know that her, nanny woman, spontaneously combusted, and I mean, for me, this Exorcist 2 is a roll your eye fest, more or less. So I guess, I pretty much said all I have to say about Exorcist 2, so I might as well just leave it there. Thank you very much for watching this review, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.